Former Bank of Canada Governor Mark Carney says he'll be advising the Liberal Party on economic challenges and opportunities for Canada. Carney presented his vision for the economic policy today at the Liberal Caucus Retreat in Nanaimo, British Columbia. A significant appointment, as Carney has been touted by some as a potential contender to replace Justin Trudeau as party leader. The announcement comes as the Liberals struggle to maintain a united front after the NDP ended its supply and confidence deal with the government. A broken deal that means more influence for the Bloc Québécois.
How do you feel about getting all of this additional power?
Good. Thank you.
Bloc Québécois Deputy House Leader Christine Normandin joins me now. It's good to see you again. Welcome back to the show.
Always a pleasure, David. Thank you for having me.
I saw your leader, Mr. Blanchet, asked how it feels to have all this power, and he said, good. How do you think it's going to work between you and the Liberals now that the NDP have pulled out of their agreement?
Well, actually, it's kind of back to what it is supposed to be. For 2.5 years, we've been in a kind of a de facto majority government, and that's not what people voted for. So we're back to what a minority government is supposed to be. So it gives us back some power, and I think it's been mentioned quite extensively this week. So we'll have more room to make requests and make gains for Quebec, which is our motto, how we are. If it's good for Quebec, we vote for it. If it's not, we vote against it. But now we can make more requests, and those requests will have to be heard if the government wants to stay in place.
Has there been any conversations yet with the Liberals? Have you put forward a list of things that you want to see done in return for support on some key legislation and confidence motions?
Well, nothing is really new about what we're asking for, and some of the things we're asking for are already bills that have been tabled and have gone through the process and are somewhere around the second vote or even at the Senate. So one of our main requests is for OAS to be adjusted so there's no discrimination between people aged 65 to 74 and 75 and plus. So that's one of the main requests we have, and we've had it for the past years. And we're waiting for the Liberals to call us, actually. We're very speakable. So we're just waiting for a phone call so we can start to discuss. I think they need us more than we need them in a way.
Well, Mr. Blanchet, this increase to the OAS for people 65 to 74, that 9-year gap, to increase that up to the level, because it bumps up for 75-year-olds, that's expensive. And you've seen the financial situation this government is in at this moment. I mean, do you see the room there for the federal government to do that? Because they kind of seems like they have hit the ceiling of their spending limit, at least in terms of the deficit staying below $40 billion.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a request that we've had for a long while, and it will benefit people everywhere. But if you hear people saying, well, it's not necessary for me, why should I pay for it? Well, people who are not that age, they have parents, and they will get there at some point. So it's really about dignity for those who have built the society we have. And there's also other requests that we have that would lessen the expenses. For example, we want to stop subsidizing the oil industry, so that's more money in the pockets of government that we can use to put in the money of the elderly instead.
Okay, so Jagmeet Singh, when he tore up the supply and confidence agreement, he said that he acknowledged he was creating more political instability than had existed under the agreement, and an early election was more likely. Mr. Blanchet says he has no appetite to accelerate an election that would likely create a conservative majority government. So how long do you see this parliament lasting now that the supply and confidence agreement has ended and the Bloc is suddenly in a much more interesting position than while that agreement was in place?
Well, I definitely don't have a crystal ball as to when we'll be in election, but the way we see it is that we now have more room to negotiate, and we have no interest in keeping Justin Trudeau in place just for the sake of keeping him in place, as we don't have any reason to give Pierre Poilievre what he wants, which is a government that Quebecers don't want. So we're not looking at this way. We're looking at the possibility of gains, the window of opportunity that just opened, and how we can use it. But in every event, we're ready for an election whenever it may come. We'll be ready, but it's not how we look at it. We don't have a schedule saying, well, we want an election then or that date. We're looking at the opportunity of making gains, and that's the sole window through which we'll analyze every decision we will be making.
Okay, so you haven't had those conversations yet with the Liberals, but you do have a sense of their agenda and what they intend to do. And I don't yet know when the first confidence vote will hit the floor of the House of Commons this fall. When you look at the parliamentary calendar and the political calendar ahead, do you see any trouble spots in terms of where a vote could happen that could bring this whole thing crashing down and that election starting much earlier than expected?
Well, I guess there will be different votes, and some of them will be controlled at some point by the government itself. They can decide when they will bring, for example, the fall economic statement and whether there'll be a vote on it. So part of it is, and when we'll have opposition days, so either us or Conservatives can table motions. But we're not in control of that agenda. We're solely in control on the negotiations we can have with regards to these votes. So there might be plenty, and the government won't fall. There might be only one needed for the government to fall. Right. That we don't know, and that's not how we're analyzing the agenda for the next session. Right.
So you're going to go vote for vote, just like the NDP, issue by issue, through the lens of is this good for Quebec or is this not good for Quebec? But politically, you saw what happened to the New Democrats with the supply and confidence agreement. Pierre Poilievre was able to sort of like lash them to the Liberals, attack them as a coalition, even though they weren't. And the NDP felt the need to separate themselves from the Liberals so they could draw a contrast between them in the next election. Mr. Poilievre has also tried to talk about the Liberal Bloc Québécois alliance in Quebec because of some shared values on issues such as climate and carbon pricing and these things. Do you see any political vulnerability there? If suddenly you become the political party that the Liberals are turning to in their moments of need, for Mr. Poilievre to start attacking you as just a replacement for the NDP and a junior partner to the Liberals?
Well, we don't expect them to be sweet and nice unless they haven't been in the past 2 years. So that'll come as no surprise if they want to continue talking about the Bloc Liberal in French and Bloc Liberal NDP in English as they have in the past 2 years. But there's still a difference, though, between what we're doing now and what the NDP had. They kind of tied their hands to a partner for which they realized after 2 years and a half that it was a bad partner. And now they kind of stuck with the decisions they have made in the past 2 years and a half, whether we'll take it decision by decision. And I don't feel that the population has necessarily an appetite, not in Quebec at least, does have an appetite for an election and doesn't want us to abdicate the possibility of making gains for them. And we've been the adult in the room for the past 2 years and a half and more, actually. And they know we're the voice of reason and we're not ultra partisan. And we're only talking about trying to make gains for the people we represent and for Quebec. And that's how we analyze things. So we're more in an electoral mode, but the target is still to make gains for Quebec and for its people. And that's the sole way to analyze whatever we'll be doing in the future, even though the Conservatives will try to paint us in a different color or make memes and everything. I think people are lucid enough to understand what we're doing.
Well, one last question. Parliament's back on Monday, but also on Monday, a by-election in Le Salle-Verdun. The Bloc is seen as a possibility to take that seat away from the Liberals. What are your thoughts on that race and the significance if the Liberals should lose it to either you or the NDP?
Well, we're always crossing our fingers, but not our arms when it comes to a by-election, and it can come as surprises, and we'll be working our best. But I think it's interesting for the fact that it gives us more room and more windows for explaining what we're doing, and that's the only way we see it. It's a great opportunity to let people know about what we're hoping for as gains for Quebec. And not only for Quebec, in some circumstances, what we're trying to achieve for Quebec is also good for Canadians. But I think it's a good window of opportunity as well to make people know what we're fighting for.
Christine Normandin, the Bloc Québécois Deputy House Leader. Thank you for your time today.
It's always a pleasure.
Okay, for some government reaction to this, we've reached Liberal House Leader Karina Gould, who joins us now from the caucus in Nanaimo, British Columbia. Minister Gould, welcome back to the show. It's good to speak to you.
Thanks, David. It hasn't been too long.
No, it was only last week. Look, you heard the Bloc Québécois Deputy House Leader there. She's not eager to get to an election, but they are eager, the Bloc, to see some changes on policy, including a bump in the OAS for people between the ages of 65 and 74. Is this something the Liberals are willing to negotiate with the Bloc Québécois?
Well, I'm certainly not going to negotiate in public, but what I will say is that, now that we're back in kind of a more regular minority parliament situation, I'm certainly going to be looking to all of the parties in the House and absolutely the Bloc Québécois to see where we can find areas of alignment and where we can move things forward in the best interest of Canadians.
She says, Ms. Normandin, that she's waiting on your government's call. I know Jagmeet Singh kind of caught everyone by surprise last week, but should they expect a call in the Bloc Québécois office? Will the House leaders get together to discuss how to make Parliament function now that supply and confidence is over?
Yeah, absolutely. I think as I mentioned on your program last week, I've always been in touch with all of the House leaders from all of the parties, and certainly I'll carry on with that tradition, but it's also a good practice. Alain Terrien, who is the House leader for the Bloc Québécois, and I, we communicate regularly. Same thing with Peter Julian and same thing with Andrew Scheer, so from the NDP and the Conservatives respectively. So I'm absolutely, going to be in contact with all of them as we get back into the House and, in conversation with them regularly.
Okay, someone who's going to be in conversation with the Prime Minister more regularly is Mark Carney, the former Governor of the Bank of Canada and the Governor of the Bank of England, who is signed on as a special advisor to the leader of the Liberal Party. Why is Mr. Carney accepting an advisory role to the party rather than the government?
Well, look, with one more year left in this mandate, we are gearing up for a potential election. We know that within a year there will be an election. So I think it's wonderful that Mark Carney has agreed to come on to be an economic sounding board as, we develop our platform, as we look to the future and what we're going to offer Canadians for the next election. And, frankly, he's, one of the most eminent Canadians when it comes to his economic bona fides. He's a former governor of the Bank of Canada, former governor of the Bank of England, and someone who cares deeply about this country and the people within it. And so I think it's just terrific that he's joining the Liberal team in this capacity.
I'm not going to quibble with his resume, his credentials, and his skill set. That would be foolish of me to do. But I wonder, Minister, why you enlist Mark Carney to develop an election platform, the economic planks, for an election a year away, when you're the government in power, where there's a productivity challenge, the economy is worsening, you've got a fall economic statement and a budget between now and then. Doesn't it make more sense for Canadians to enlist that brain power to help them with your two big chances to change the direction of the economy in the time you have before the election?
Well, in fairness, as a government, we are always reaching out to economic experts and experts in all fields when it comes to developing and moving forward with government policy. So, it doesn't mean that people are excluded when it comes to developing government policy, but I think this is very specific in terms of what the Liberal Party of Canada is going to offer Canadians coming into the future. We have been working on our economic plan and delivering on it. Just last week, we saw the Bank of Canada bring interest rates down again, which is a good thing for Canadians. We know they need to keep doing it so that Canadians feel that relief in their pocketbooks. But, I think Mark Carney coming on board, working with us, particularly as the Liberal Party, is about demonstrating that, we continue to have eminent, strong, expert Canadians who are committed to the Liberal vision of Canada and who are going to help us, present that vision and that platform for the future.
The Conservative criticism, they like to give nicknames. They call him Carbon Tax Carney, even though he has said that the carbon tax has sort of run its course, which is an interesting policy disagreement with your government. But they're also saying he's in this advisory position with the party rather than with the government because he has a lot of business interests serving on boards that may put him into a conflict if he was brought in a formal role in government. Is that part of the reasoning by making this an advisory position to the leader rather than the Prime Minister?
As my some of my Quebec colleagues would say it sounds like ils cherchent les chicanes. The Conservatives are looking for something to go after, which I think is just kind of folly, to be honest. I think it kind of pains them because he was appointed by Stephen Harper to become the governor of the Bank of Canada, that it's actually the Liberal economic vision that he supports and not what Pierre Poilievre is putting forward, which is cuts that are ultimately going to hurt Canadians and hurt the Canadian economy.
Do you take his advice, though, Minister, that he presented, I believe it was at a Senate committee earlier this year, that he supported the carbon tax up until now, that it served a purpose up until now. And as the cost of living challenges intersect with the rising price on pollution, it becomes an untenable policy choice at this point in time. So if he comes back to the Liberals and says, you need to move off this for the good of the economy and for the good of the party, I mean, what do you do?
Well, let's wait until we get his advice, David, before we answer that question. But I think one thing has been very clear is that, we are very committed as Liberals to fighting climate change and to ensuring that we are also addressing affordability issues at the same time. And the price on pollution is returned to Canadians in the forms of the carbon rebate. And unlike the Conservatives, we actually have a plan to fight climate change, and we believe that it's real. And so this is something that, we feel strongly about, but we're looking forward to the work that he's going to do and the advice that he's going to provide us.
But do you think Mr. Carney's advice will have an impact in the fall economic statement? Should you present one this fall, in the next budget? Or is it going to be parceled off and kept for the party election platform?
Well, so he is appointed to be a special advisor with the Liberal Party of Canada. So this is very much advice that he's providing to us in his capacity with the Liberal Party.
Right. So I guess this goes back to my question. If the need for a productivity boost, and we've had Trevor Toome on the show last night talking about the divergence between Canada, the US, Canada and Europe, the OECD, the country is lagging in GDP per capita and other areas. If that is a fundamental need and a challenge, why not enlist Mr. Carney to advise the government so that you can enact policies in the 2 legislative sittings you have left before Parliament rises if the election goes on schedule, rather than parking it off to the side for the next election?
Well, so, there are 2 functions that we have. One is as the government and governing for Canadians. And in that, we consult a wide range of economists and actors and experts, in terms of what we're doing. That's part of the official consultation process that we do in the lead up to every budget, for example, that the Minister of Finance and other cabinet ministers and caucus members do in terms of gathering those good ideas, those best practices as we're putting a budget forward for Canadians. And then there's the other part of the work that we do as politicians, as more political actors, and that is certainly about us preparing for the next election. And so what the Prime Minister has asked of Mark Carney and what he is going to provide is that more advice that's going to inform our platform, that's going to inform the policies that are being put forward by the Liberal Party of Canada ahead of the next election. So we have to be able to do both of those things, even though they are together but separate.
I spoke to Alexandra Mendez on the show last night, your colleague from Brossard-Saint-Lambert, the Quebec riding, and she said it is the overwhelming consensus of the people in her riding that the Prime Minister needs to go. And she expressed deep doubts that you can win the next election without a change in leadership. I saw Hedy Fry on social media being asked questions about how people in British Columbia feel about the Prime Minister, and she said a lot of people are saying they don't like him, but we're going to discuss that internally. How common has that sentiment been from the MPs who have made their way to Nanaimo to talk about the future of the party? Are you getting a lot of feedback that it's time for a change at the top?
Honestly, what I'm hearing today is a call for unity, a call to be focused not on our internal party matters, but to be focused on delivering for Canadians. And that's really been the focus of the conversations that we've been having. And, that's something that, as I've said many times, we spent the summer listening to Canadians, and our focus has to be on how we are best serving Canadians. It's not about internal Liberal Party politics. It's about how we as Liberals, as the government, are keeping Canadians front and center, focused on delivering for what they need.
Well, what does it say, Minister Gould, that Liberal MPs show up in Nanaimo and on day one they're talking about this, and they're talking about it openly. I've got partisans yelling at me for asking about it, but it's your MPs and your caucus members who are talking about it, so we're compelled to. So, like, what does it say just about the anxiety and the frustration that people are feeling across, that they're willing to talk so openly and honestly about this?
Well, look, I mean, we're a big tent party, and we want to be able to ensure that we have a diversity of views so that we can get to the best outcome for Canadians. But what I can tell you is that what I'm hearing from colleagues is a call for unity, a call for support behind the Prime Minister, a reflection that, you know, it's not about us. It needs to be about Canadians. And, you know, that's something that I also feel really strongly about, you know, support for the Prime Minister so that we can continue to deliver on the positive progressive agenda that we've put forward that has delivered really important and meaningful programs for Canadians. And so that's where we are today, and that's what we're talking about. And, you know, I think that we're going to come out of this caucus more unified and ready to get back to Ottawa to do what we do best, and that's stand up and fight for Canadians.
Government House Leader Karina Gould, thanks for coming back. I suspect we may speak again next week when Parliament resumes. So thanks for being here today. Thank you.
I have a funny feeling we might. Thanks, David.
All right. Thanks, Minister Gould.